She was 28, confident, and craved the kind of silence only mountains could offer. Annika Weiss, a solo hiker and photography enthusiast from Munich, packed light but smart, a Canon DSLR, a red windbreaker, a compass passed down from her grandfather. She'd hiked across Italy, trekked the Dolomites alone, and once camped for 3 nights above the Arctic Circle. Nature wasn't just a hobby, it was her escape. In August 2013, Annika set off on what she called her reset trip, a 10-day solo trek through the Bernese Oberland region of the Swiss Alps. Her plan was clear: begin in Lauterbrunnen, follow a route through the alpine villages and glacier passes, and loop back through the valleys. She left a copy of her itinerary with her sister Leona, texted regular updates, and posted photos to Instagram, each more breathtaking than the last. Day 1. A sunrise shot over Murren. Day 2. Clouds rolling over the Schilthorn. Day 3. Her tent pitched near a glacial lake, captioned, "Feels like the top of the world." Then nothing. August 14th. No new photo. No check-in, no call. Leona waited. Hours turned into a day. A creeping worry became full-blown panic. By August 16th, Swiss authorities were notified. Friends said Annika wouldn't go dark without a reason. She always carried a satellite beacon, she always made contact, but her device never pinged. Her trail ended near the base of the Finsteraarhorn Glacier, a jagged, otherworldly region carved by time and ice. From that point on, it was like she had been erased. No signal, no distress call, no trace, just frozen silence and questions. What happened to Annika Weiss? Where did she go after that last sunrise? Did she fall? Was she taken? Or did something else entirely happen on that mountain? The Bernese Alps had swallowed travelers before, but this time felt different. This time, the mountain didn't just take a hiker, it took a story, and for 10 years, no one could finish it. The alarm went out at 6:42 a.m. Swiss Alpine Rescue was mobilized within the hour. Helicopters circled the peaks, dogs sniffed crevasses. Volunteers hiked narrow trails carved into rock faces, calling her name into the wind. They retraced Annika's known route, piecing together her last movements like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Her footprints were found near the Finsteraarhorn trailhead, but the snow made everything uncertain. That same week, in a cruel twist of timing, a freak summer snowstorm swept through the region, dumping nearly 2 feet of powder and burying anything left behind. Visibility dropped. Ice formed where gravel had been. Rescue crews were grounded for 2 days. By the time they could fly again, whatever trace Annika might have left was buried or blown away. Still, they searched. Grid by grid, valley by valley. Drones were deployed. Her photo was shown to shepherds, climbers, and base lodge workers. A few claimed to have seen someone matching her description, a woman in red, a lone figure near a glacier's edge, but nothing ever checked out. Her camp stove was found weeks later, miles from her intended route. It was clean, packed neatly, like she had meant to use it again. But her tent, pack, gear gone. Even the snow gave up no clues. After 10 days, the official search was called off. The rescue team issued a single line to the press. No conclusive evidence has been found to determine the location or condition of Miss Weiss. The file was closed as unresolved, but her family never stopped looking. Not really. Her sister Leona kept her voicemail active, kept her room untouched. She returned to the Alps every August 14th. Locals began calling her the Shadow Sister. They'd see her hiking Annika's old routes, leaving flowers near trailheads and searching with eyes too tired for their age. The Alps had taken Annika without leaving a trace. But they hadn't taken the questions. They hadn't taken the silence. And somewhere between the ice and the sky, the mountain was still holding a secret no one had yet uncovered. 3 days before she vanished, Annika posted what would become the most dissected image in her entire digital footprint. It looked ordinary at first. A misty alpine ridge, snow dusting the rocks, fog crawling up from the valley below. But behind the landscape half shrouded by cloud, nearly lost in the grain of the image, was something else. A shape. A figure. standing upright, still and distant, just barely visible over Annika's left shoulder. Leona received the photo directly via message. No filters. No caption except, "Not alone up here." She didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe another hiker, a guide, a stranger passing by. But after Annika vanished, the photo became something else entirely. The last clue, the last breadcrumb. Reddit threads sprang up, Facebook groups. Amateur sleuths zoomed in, adjusted contrast, ran AI enhancements. Some said it was a person, others said it was just a shadow, a trick of the fog. One user claimed the same figure appeared in another hiker's photo, taken years earlier, same region, same distance, same eerie stillness. But nothing could be verified. The metadata was clean, no signs of manipulation, just one image. A mist-covered ridge, a girl smiling, and someone behind her. Theories exploded online. Was Annika being followed? Stalked? Did she photograph something or someone she wasn't supposed to see? Conspiracy channels latched on. The Alpine Watcher theory trended for weeks, but none of it brought her closer to home. The authorities called it unreliable speculation, said the figure was likely another climber, out of focus, distorted by mist. But the photo didn't go away. It kept circulating, kept haunting those who saw it. Some swore the figure didn't change position between exposures, like it wasn't walking, just watching, waiting. The last photo of Annika Weiss wasn't just an image. It was a question carved into the snow line. If she wasn't alone, then who else was up there? Time passed, but Leona couldn't. Not really. The world had moved on. Hikers came and went. Weather changed. Snow melted. But Annika remained frozen in that year, 2013. A face on a missing person poster, a name on a cold case list. But to Leona, she was still a sister, a voice she could still hear, a room she couldn't clean. Every year, on August 14th, Leona returned to the Swiss Alps. She took the same train to Lauterbrunnen, stayed in the same guest house, walked the same route her sister had planned. Locals started to recognize her. Some avoided her, others offered quiet nods of respect. She wasn't just grieving, she was searching. She taped missing posters to trailhead signs, left laminated photos in gas stations and mountain lodges. She always brought new flyers, always used updated translations, German, French, Italian. "Have you seen her?" she asked hundreds. Only a few responded, and even fewer were sure. But then something strange began to happen. Hikers unrelated, unaware of the case, started reporting the same thing. A woman in red, alone, high up near the glacier edge, sometimes just a flash of color against rock, other times a full silhouette standing still, vanishing behind ridges. Some called it a ghost story. Others said it was projection people seeing what they'd read online. But the pattern persisted. Same area, same description, always alone, always silent, always in red. One report came from a retired climber. He swore she waved at him from across a ravine, then vanished into a wall of fog. "She looked real," he said. "Not a dream, not a trick." Another claimed they found a boot print where she stood, but by the time anyone returned to verify, the snow had taken it back. Leona kept every report, logged every sighting, printed every email. Her sister was out there, she believed it, with the kind of certainty that couldn't be reasoned with. Maybe not alive, maybe not fully gone, but out there, somewhere. The Alps were still holding her, not letting go. And the silence? It wasn't empty, it was waiting. It was a detail nearly lost to time, a memory buried beneath 10 years of faded posters and unanswered calls. But during one of Leona's yearly visits in 2019, a conversation with an innkeeper in the village of Grindelwald changed everything. The woman was old, her eyes cloudy but sharp when it came to details. She remembered Annika said she passed through the village on August 12th, stayed for soup, asked for directions to the glacier trail. But it wasn't Annika the innkeeper found strange. It was the man who checked in that same night, late. Just before the kitchen closed, no reservation, no name, paid in cash, spoke little, wore an old mountaineering jacket and kept his hood up even indoors. He left at dawn before breakfast, saying nothing. The staff didn't press him. Travelers come and go. But something stayed with her. The room. After he left, a housekeeper found a map on the desk, torn, stained, and heavily marked. The route? Almost identical to Annika's. Same trailheads, same elevations, same final stretch near the Finsteraarhorn Glacier. The map was never reported. Why would it be? Just a hiker, just a piece of paper. But the woman had kept it. Something about it had unsettled her. She gave it to Leona in a sealed envelope, hands trembling. "I thought you should have it," she said. "It feels connected somehow." The markings weren't just routes, they were underlines, circles, X's. One circled note stood out. Obsgarten Alt Trailhead? It was an obscure, disused path, barely visible on modern maps. Annika hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Leona handed the map to police. They filed it. That was it. But the questions lingered. Who was that man? Why did he mirror Annika's trail? And what was he looking for on that glacier? No one ever came forward. No records. No sightings. Just one night, one marked map, and a silence colder than the mountain itself. Some started calling him the Watcher, a name born from rumor, from threads online that spun mystery into myth. But Leona didn't care for labels. She only cared about one thing. If someone else had been out there with her sister, someone who didn't want to be found, then maybe Annika hadn't vanished by accident. The glacier had always been there, unmoving and ancient until it wasn't. In the summer of 2023, after a record-breaking heat wave swept across Europe, sections of the Finsteraarhorn Glacier began to recede at a pace scientists hadn't seen before. Meltwater carved new paths. Chasms opened. Ice that had been frozen for decades began to surrender its secrets. That's when Simon Keller stepped into the story. A seasoned mountaineer and part-time glaciologist, Simon had spent years climbing the same routes Annika had taken. He knew the terrain, the hidden dangers, the rhythms of ice and rock. But what he found that July was something he hadn't expected. Wedged in a melt crevice near a rock outcrop, half buried in blue ice, was a torn strap-black nylon with a rusted buckle. At first, he thought it was just old climbing gear. But as he cleared away the frozen slush, he saw a name stitched into the fabric in fading red thread. Annika W. The strap was part of a camera bag, water, damaged, brittle, but intact enough to recognize the shape. The zipper was frozen shut. He radioed for help. Within hours, the area was marked and documented. Swiss authorities confirmed the bag was a model released in 2012. Inside, protected by layers of cloth, was a cracked memory card case and a worn lens cap. The camera itself? Gone. Either shattered on impact or still buried deeper in the ice. But the name was enough. After a decade of dead ends, it was the first physical trace of Annika Weiss since the day she vanished. News spread fast. Articles, TV segments. Missing German hikers' belongings found in Swiss glacier. But Leona didn't care about the headlines. She only cared that something had finally surfaced. Something real. Something her sister had held in her hands. Forensics dated the bag to early August 2013. Based on the location, Annika would have had to veer off her intended path to reach that spot. Why? What had drawn her there? Or worse, what had chased her? The glacier had buried its secret for 10 long years. Now, for the first time, it was ready to talk. And it started with a name sewn into a frozen strap, whispering up from the ice. It took 2 weeks to thaw the memory card without damaging it. Specialists at a forensic lab in Bern worked slowly, using a dehumidifying chamber and micro-tools usually reserved for recovering evidence from plane crashes. No one knew if anything would survive, but it did. Against all odds, the data remained intact, 152 photos. All time-stamped between August 9th and 14th, 2013. Annika's journey was suddenly visible again. Her first few shots were wide landscapes, clean, crisp, full of life. Sunlight pouring through alpine peaks, meadows dusted with late summer blooms, rock faces veined with ice. Then came the portraits. Self-timer shots of her standing on ridges, crossing creeks, laughing into the wind. She looked happy, unburdened. The kind of peace that only comes when someone's exactly where they want to be. The last confirmed photo taken by her showed her camp on the edge of the glacier, her red windbreaker tied around her waist, the caption in metadata, elevation 2, 800 meter, clear skies. But then came one final image, blurred, shaky, no focal point. Just a sliver of sky, a rush of motion, and what looked like a gloved hand reaching out just off frame. Analysts tried everything, enhancement, contrast, movement tracking. It told them nothing. No proof of a struggle, no proof of a fall, but also no proof of peace. It could have been an accident, a photo taken mid-stumble, or it could have been something else. Something no one wanted to say out loud. One technician noted faint motion trails in the bottom corner, possibly legs. Running? Approaching? No way to tell. The metadata showed it had been taken just 14 minutes after the previous shot. Whatever happened, it happened fast. The authorities called it inconclusive. The family called it something else, a fracture, a break in the story, a line between before and after. Before, a smiling girl, lost in her journey. After, silence. The image never went public. Leona refused. "It's not for the world," she said. "It's for her." Still, the question spread. If Annika had slipped, where was her body? If she hadn't, if someone else had been with her, why was that last photo the only trace? The camera didn't solve the mystery, it deepened it. Because the Alps had finally spoken, but only in fragments. It arrived on a Wednesday morning in October. No return address, postmarked from Zermatt. Leona had just returned from her latest trip to the Alps, another search, another year with no answers. The envelope was plain, slightly weathered, with no sender's name. She almost threw it out with the junk mail, but when she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a single photograph, not printed, developed, matte finish. Faded at the edges like it had been stored for years, and on it Annika. Standing on a trail Leona didn't recognize. She wore her red jacket, a slight smile on her face. The photo was different from all the others. It wasn't from her Instagram. Not in the files from the recovered memory card, not in the family archive. Leona knew every image her sister had ever taken. This one didn't belong. On the back, written in tight, slanted handwriting, she chose the wrong mountain. That was it, no signature, no explanation. Just that sentence, cryptic, cruel, chilling. Leona stared at the photo for hours. The background looked familiar, but off. Like it was part of the Bernese region, but not her sister's original route. She scanned maps, compared peaks, asked guides. Nothing matched. And the angle, it wasn't a selfie. Someone else had taken it, which meant someone had been with her. And not just during the trip, someone still had access to that photo, 10 years later. Zermatt police launched an investigation. The envelope had no fingerprints. The film was traced to a common Kodak brand sold in Swiss convenience stores until 2015. Nothing unique, nothing traceable. The letter sparked a storm in online forums. Some believed it was a hoax. Others called it proof. Proof she hadn't been alone. Proof someone had followed her, maybe even kept her. But Leona didn't speculate. She just held the photo close, staring into her sister's eyes. Not just searching for answers, but warning signs. Was she in danger in this photo, or was she trying to send a message? The handwriting said she chose the wrong mountain, but maybe it wasn't her choice at all. Maybe someone else chose it for her. Simon Keller hadn't meant to get involved. He wasn't looking for headlines or answers, just solitude, same as always. He'd spent 20 years on the peaks, guiding tourists in summer, skiing avalanche routes in winter. The mountains were his home, his rhythm, his religion. But after finding Annika's frozen camera bag, something shifted. Her name wouldn't leave him. It followed him back down the glacier, into his dreams, and through the long, quiet hours in his cabin. He reread every article, studied every map, cross-referenced timelines, weather patterns, GPS logs. Her route was clean, smart. She knew what she was doing. But someone had forced her off it. In spring 2024, when the ice began to recede again, Simon returned, not as a mountaineer, as a seeker. He retraced her steps from the beginning, carrying a small drone, a weather journal, and a quiet determination no one could talk him out of. For days, he saw nothing unusual, just the cold silence of alpine rock. But then the terrain began to change. Around the fourth day, near a remote ridgeline not marked on any public trail map, he found something. A torn scrap of nylon wedged beneath a rock slab, red, sun-bleached, fraying at the edges. He recognized the material immediately. Same kind of windbreaker Annika wore in her last photos. Further up, tucked behind a fallen stone, he spotted stacked rocks, deliberate, balanced, unnatural. A cairn, but wrong, not a trail marker. No hiker would place one here. It pointed east, toward a steep gorge locals called Daikili the Throat. He documented everything, marked GPS, took photographs, sent nothing to the press. This wasn't for them. This was between him, the mountain, and the girl it had swallowed. That night, he camped near the ridge. The wind howled like a voice trying to speak. He lay awake, staring at the stars, wondering if Annika had ever looked at that same sky on her final night. He made a promise then. He would keep going. Until the mountain gave her back. Not just in fragments. In truth, it wasn't on any map. The gorge was narrow, steep, and brutal, carved by centuries of glacial retreat and forgotten by time. Locals avoided it. Said the air felt wrong, too still. Birds didn't fly there, snow didn't stick. Simon descended carefully, boots scraping against scree, every muscle tense with focus. He almost missed it, just a shadow against stone. But when he looked closer, he saw the edge of a rusted hinge, buried beneath moss and frost. A door, half-rotted, hidden behind a fold in the rock. He pulled it open. The air inside was dry, stale, old. A single-room alpine shelter likely built decades ago by shepherds or soldiers. Inside, it was dark, save for a slant of sunlight breaking through a cracked roof beam. Dust drifted in the light like ash. There was a broken bench, a rusted tin cup, and in the corner, a scarf. Faded red. Tucked beneath a pile of rocks like someone had tried to hide it. He lifted it gently. On the wall above, barely visible, were letters carved into the wood, jagged, uncertain but unmistakable. A.W. 2013. Simon didn't speak, didn't move, just stared, because in that moment the story changed. Annika hadn't vanished instantly. She'd made it here. She'd taken shelter. She was alive, at least for a while. He searched the rest of the shelter. A cracked mirror, scorch marks on stone. A makeshift fire ring, long dead, and next to the door, 4 tiny scratch marks on the wood. Days? Hours? There was no way to know, but it was something. Proof, not a myth, not a rumor. A real place, a real girl, a real attempt to survive. He took photos of everything, logged coordinates, then sat down in silence. A scarf, initials, the fire. The markings, she'd made it here, but she hadn't made it out. Simon ran his fingers over the carved letters one last time. "I see you," he whispered. "I'm still looking." And outside, the gorge stayed silent, holding its breath, as if waiting to see what he'd find next. They don't mark it on tourist maps, the guides don't talk about it. But among locals, mountain men, retired climbers, old rescue workers, there's a name passed between hushed conversations and campfires: Das Flüstertal, the Whispering Valley. An off-grid stretch of terrain northeast of the Finsteraarhorn Massif, known less for its beauty than for the way it swallows people. It's steep, narrow, and wind-cut, so quiet it plays tricks on the mind. Some say you can hear voices echoing through the rock. Not birds, not animals, just soft whispers that never quite form words. It's a story you only hear if you know who to ask. A guide in Grindelwald told Simon after a few drinks. "We don't go there," he said. "It doesn't let people out." Over the decades there have been stories, women mostly, all solo travelers, all experienced. Disappearances that weren't widely reported. A Norwegian skier in 1991. A French alpinist in 2002. A Czech backpacker in 2008. All vanished within a 10-kilometer radius. No rescues, no remains. Just gaps in time and grief. Locals tell of a hermit who lives off the grid, an ex-soldier who never came down after the war. Others say the area is laced with abandoned tunnels from World War II, used for covert operations and munitions storage. Officially, the government denies they exist. But older climbers speak of narrow shafts, long sealed, opening only after landslides or ice melts. Hiding spots, traps, tombs. Some believe it's nothing supernatural, just a perfect convergence of bad terrain and bad luck. Others believe it's something worse. Intentional. Simon listened, took notes, marked the valley on his map, and circled it in red. The gorge where he found the shelter was close, too close. If Annika stumbled into the Whispering Valley, she didn't just get lost. She may have found something or someone who didn't want to be found. And now, after a decade of silence, the ice was melting. The mountain was loosening its grip, and if the valley had been whispering before, it was about to speak. The final stretch was the hardest, down a narrow glacial ravine veined with meltwater and time. Simon moved slowly, his boots crunching over unstable ice, his breath visible in the thinning air. The sun was fading. A storm was threatening. But something kept pushing him forward, a gut pull, the same feeling that led him to the scarf, the same silence that had guided him into the shelter. And then he saw it. A flash of color half buried beneath a crust of snow. Fabric. Faded red. He dropped to his knees, clearing ice with gloved hands. First the jacket, then a hiking boot, then bone, fragile, pale. Still wearing a watch, stopped at 4:17. He radioed authorities, marked the location, but he didn't leave. Not yet. The body was curled gently, as if placed, not thrown. A scarf tucked under the head. A small flat stone laid across the hands. Ritual or respect, either way, it wasn't random. It wasn't a fall. This was intentional. Nearby, half melted from the snow, was a cracked camera lens, the same brand Annika used. Beneath a rock, Simon found a broken compass, the initials AW scratched into the casing. Search and rescue arrived 12 hours later. Forensic teams confirmed the remains through dental records. It was her. After 10 years, the mountain had given her back. But the position of the body told a different story. She hadn't died in a fall. There were no fractures, no signs of impact, no evidence of trauma, just hypothermia and time. Except, someone had been with her at the end. The stone, the scarf, the careful placement. Not an accident, not abandonment. Someone stayed, or returned, maybe even watched. And whoever they were, they'd wanted her to rest undisturbed. For 10 years the ice had obeyed. But the glacier was retreating now. The secrets were surfacing. And in the cold, haunting quiet of that ravine, Simon Keller stood over the bones of a girl the world had forgotten. "I found you," he whispered. "They won't forget you again." But even as he spoke the words, he knew. This wasn't the end of the mystery, it was the beginning. The discovery should have brought closure. But for Simon, it only raised more questions. The way Annika had been found, carefully positioned, sheltered from the elements, her belongings arranged like parting gifts, didn't sit right. Someone had been there, someone had stayed, or returned. And if that someone was still out there, they weren't just part of the story. They were the ending. So Simon went back. Not to the glacier, but to the shelter in the gorge, the place where Annika had made her last stand. The initials on the wall, the scorched fire pit, the scarf tucked in the corner. He knew someone else had been there too. Maybe they still came back, out of guilt, memory, control. He set up a hidden camera, motion-triggered, low light, mounted beneath the rotted rafters, disguised beneath old moss and stone. Then he waited. For days, nothing. just wind and silence. Then on the fifth day motion, the footage came in just before dawn. A figure, male, middle-aged, gray hair, full beard, wearing an old military jacket. He moved with familiarity, like someone returning to a place he knew by heart. He stepped inside, looked around, then knelt where the scarf had once been. Stayed there for 22 minutes. Didn't speak, didn't eat, just sat in the quiet. Then he left, disappearing into the gorge like mist. Simon watched the footage 3 times. There was no doubt. Whoever this man was, he knew Annika had been there. He may have brought her there. He may have kept her there. Simon backed up the footage, zipped the files, and drove through the night to Interlaken. He handed the drive to authorities himself, not trusting mail, not trusting delay. "He's real," he said. "He's still up there." The officer reviewed the footage in silence, then stood. "We'll take it from here." But Simon knew what the mountains knew too well. No one takes anything from them without a cost. The raid came 6 days later. Quiet, surgical, no press, no noise. Just a convoy of unmarked vehicles and thermal drones scanning the mountains near a stretch of forgotten trail east of Whispering Valley. What they found wasn't a campsite, it was a compound, buried beneath the trees, camouflaged against the rock. A stone and timber shelter expanded over years, maybe decades. Inside, canned food, old maps, survival gear and belongings that shouldn't have been there, a woman's scarf, a torn hiking journal, a second camera bag, 3 passports, none belonging to him. And in a sealed metal case, tucked beneath a floorboard, was a journal with Annika's name written inside. The ink had faded, but the entries were legible. The last dozen pages told a different story than the world had known. She hadn't just vanished, she'd been followed, watched, spoken to by a man who seemed lost but not afraid. He claimed to be a guide but wouldn't share his name. The journal hinted at manipulation subtle at first, flattery, warnings about dangerous routes, promises of a shortcut. Then, fear. "He knows my name," she wrote. "I didn't tell him. He's always ahead of me now, waiting. Last night I moved my camp. He still found it." The final entry. "He said I chose the wrong mountain, but maybe it chose me." The man was arrested without resistance. Mid-60s. Ex-military. Identity confirmed. Friedrich Mettler. Discharged in 2001. Never returned home. No bank activity, no phone, no address. Just a shadow living in the wilderness. Surviving in plain sight. Authorities believe he may be linked to other disappearances in the region, but without bodies, without evidence, nothing sticks. When questioned, he said nothing. Just stared at the wall, whispered, "She stayed longer than the others." Simon wasn't allowed to see him, didn't want to. He stood at the edge of the valley that morning, watching fog roll down the ridges, wondering how many others had passed through, how many journals were never found, how many endings had been rewritten in silence. The mountains had spoken. Finally. But they hadn't said everything. Not yet. They held the service on a gray morning, just below the ridge where Annika had last been seen. No music, no speeches, just stone, mist, and the quiet breath of the mountains. Leona stood with her hand resting on the urn, her fingers trembling slightly as alpine wind tugged at her coat. A decade of questions, of posters taped to trailheads and dreams haunted by red jackets, had led to this one final moment. Closure wasn't peace, but it was something. For the first time, Annika Weiss had a place to rest. A real one. Not a rumor, not a photo, not a whisper. Leona left a folded scarf on the memorial stone, faded red, like the one her sister always wore. Then she turned and walked away, not looking back. Not yet. Simon Keller didn't attend the ceremony. He stayed on the ridge, watching from a distance, just beyond the fog line. He'd seen enough death up close. Instead, he honored her in the only way he knew how, by telling the story. 6 months later, his book was published, She Didn't Fall. It was part memoir, part investigation, and part confession. He wrote about the discovery, the shelter, the man in the mist. He left out certain details, the ones too dark, too unfinished, but what mattered was on the page. The world finally knew who Annika was, not just the girl who vanished, but the one who fought to be found. Critics called it haunting, beautiful, terrifying, but Simon didn't care about the praise. He cared about the truth, and the truth was simple. She had never been alone. The Alps remained unchanged. The trails still drew hikers each summer. The snow still came in sheets, erasing footprints by morning. But those who'd heard the story really heard it never walked the same routes again without looking over their shoulder. Because the mountains are more than just rock and weather. They're ancient, indifferent. They watch, they keep, and sometimes what lives in them isn't the cold or the cliffs or the silence. Sometimes it's something else. Leona wrote the last line in the book's foreword, just 9 words. Words that hung in the air like fog on the ridge. Sometimes the wilderness doesn't take you, something else does. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.